Well, the first thing my mom said was like, "Oh, okay, well, time to take lessons, right?" I'm like, "Great, okay." So I go down to the music store, and he's like, "Okay, well, this is a C, and this is a, here's, looking at reading music." And after about 2 or 3 weeks, I kind of started getting sick and didn't want to go, and I just blew off lessons and learned by myself. I just didn't really want to go that route. I wanted to find stuff out myself and look at books and learn chords and watch people play and all that. So for some reason, I just really felt allergic to that approach. Later, I learned how to read music, but I never got very good at it. It kind of sucked.
So you would just take records and try to copy what you found on a record, or?
Yeah, that's what I sort of did. I did a lot of that. And then, at a certain point, I started reading music more and learning some classical pieces and some jazz things. I was like in the college jazz band or whatever. I sort of dabbled. And then at a certain point I couldn't stand anymore. I'd stop or whatever. The particular engagement would end, and that would be it. But pick up some tricks along the way, basically. 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, the whole musician thing doesn't look good on paper, I don't think. It's like, I'm going to be a guitar player, right? Because there's not enough of them. I think that's what the world needs now. It's guitarists, sweet guitarists. Basically, after Edna Swap, I just found myself playing in the studio a lot. And I was walking my dog, thinking to myself, I may never tour again. This might be it for me, And I was kind of thinking, that's all right, man. It's no big deal. I got kind of burnt out on it, And cut to going into the studio with Paul, a producer that I worked with a lot. We were talking, I guess, around Christmas 2001, maybe. And he said, yeah, man, I just got a gig with Paul McCartney, I think. I said, wow, that's great. I was so happy for him because David Kahn, David.
Yeah.
And I was so happy because I thought, wow, that's awesome, man. That would be a good pairing, and it'd be great to hear some really cool new Paul McCartney music and stuff. And I wasn't even really thinking about myself being involved at first. And then I started, like anybody, the thought crept in my mind. And then he goes, yeah, and he goes, we might need some guitar playing. I'm going, well, let me know, man. He goes, so that, I sort of waited around for a couple months. And not telling too many people because I sort of felt a little bit, that Hollywood curse, if you tell anybody about anything.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah, like you go, oh yeah, this is what I'm doing, and then all of a sudden you have to eat your words. So I sort of told a person or two and kind of kept it to myself, and then it actually happened. And I found myself in the studio. It was at Henson, which used to be A&M, and I walked in the door, and I didn't see him, but these people with English accents were hanging out, and I met some of them, and then I finally met Paul, and that was kind of a sort of a tense moment. It took me a while to get used to being around him because I was such a fan, from an early age, in the like that early, like the 5-year-old kind of way. You know what I mean? That you can't really. It's before you had any logic or any bearings on like adults were really tall, and
So you ended up working on the entire record, and then they asked you at the end of the record if you'd want to go on tour. Is that kind of how it happened?
He doesn't. Paul doesn't really. He waits to say the same thing with the Hollywood Curse. Until he's really sure about something, he doesn't say it. So I think that he doesn't really have to tour. It's up to his. He's on such a different level, just in every way.
He doesn't need to gig.
Yeah, it's all basically because he feels like he wants to. He would enjoy it. It would be a benefit to his life. So we did the very first gig actually with Paul was sort of. Once I did that, I thought, I can do anything, because it was at Madison Square Garden, playing with David Bowie and The Who and the Stones and all these huge bands right after 9/11, and then we went on Last, and when the gig was happening, part of the thing of a gig, you always dream like, ooh, Woodstock or whatever. You go, the lights and and the vibe, and you get used to that playing larger gigs. But I'd never I had played arenas actually. I'd played arenas, but I'd never played Madison Square Garden. So, but playing with all these people, and then you go out there, we walked on stage, and it's all white lights, just house lights, because they're filming it because, the firefighters in the front, and the whole thing was for 9/11, and it was such an intense, emotional day, The feeling sort of was like, I've done this before, I can do it, this is amazing, wow, what a trip. But it was also sort of like there was no real glue or nothing saying in my own consciousness that any of this could be done, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that it was okay to be up there doing that.
Now, when you play with Paul on like Beatles songs, is he particular about what you should play? Like, does he want you to play the Beatles parts exactly?
I'm so respectful of that music. To me, it's sort of like the Bible. That I just get off on that. You don't want to rewrite it, At the same time, you don't want to be a karaoke guy and have no personality. So I sort of put my English on things and sort of angled it a little bit. And I don't know, there hasn't been, occasionally Paul will make a little statement about, I want this or that, But especially the first tour, he really was hands off. Like, I think there was so much respect for the Beatles in the first place that he sort of felt like this is representing it. And I also think, if the Beatles are around to play those songs, not just to mention Paul's, solo stuff, but let's just say Beatles. But if the Beatles were around to play that music, they wouldn't play it verbatim.
What was the best gig you ever had?
Well, certainly, probably the biggest buzz was we did a gig in Rome, the Colosseum, in front of the Colosseum for 500,000 people, and that was crazy. That was just, because at some point you go, well, the hardest gig to play is in front of one person. 2 is a little easier. 10 people is a little easier. You know what I mean? Like, the more people there are, the more sort of agreement that there's a reason for everyone to be there is, right? So, and you think, well, what's the difference between 10,000, 100,000, and 500? Well, there is a difference. It was trippy because it was like a river. Like, at a certain point, we're playing Let It Be or something. Everyone's holding up their lighters, and it was like a river of fireflies going off the edge of the earth. Like, you cannot see the end. There's so many people. And they actually had screens and PA that like here's the stage, and they have a screen and PA. And then you go about 50,000 people, then more screens, PA, another 50,000 more screens. And this went on like for I don't know, 10 or 20 of them. And they somehow like aligned the visual and like they had the math together.
Timeline, yeah.
Wow. And it was just like, what am I doing here? Cool, I'll play,